because Mick said that he's brought up in his match report, and it's the theme for my column actually tomorrow as well, is that, you know, Brendan Rodgers has said that he's not going to change his style in Europe. You know, he's going to stick with what he goes with, stick with what he did over in Dortmund, which ended up another really difficult, kind of painful night for Celtic and for Scottish football in general. Because we don't want to see our sides getting turned over and humiliated like that. Now, I get that Brendan Rodgers isn't going to rip everything up and adopt Don Cowie's tactical blueprint from today. We get that. But there has to be tweaks, and he could actually look. And the funny thing is that I think before the game they were saying that Don Cowie was the first player that Brendan Rodgers actually paid a transfer fee for. I think 15 years ago when he was cutting his teeth at Watford.
Okay. And
Don Cowie, the pupil, has actually put on a bit of a tactical masterclass there in terms of how do you get a side which is a glaring financial chasm between it and the team that's up against, and yet make them competitive. And I think I genuinely do believe that Brendan Rodgers should look at that and say, right, can I steal something? Can I just take little bits from that and try and feed it into how his Celtic side will play against Atalanta in a couple of weeks' time?
Well, Sorry, Keith, didn't mean to interrupt. Basically, what I was going to say is, I think a lot of Celtic fans, I can't really speak for them, you know, but I think a lot of people would share the opinion that Rodgers, after the Dortmund game, has said, look, I'm going to go with my vision. I'm not going to go there and lose 3-1 sitting in. I'm going to go with my vision and everyone else be damned. But there's an in-between.
Yeah, it's very arrogant. It's very arrogant. And I don't believe him either. We sat here the other night and I said to you, he can't go the same way again. He can't. He has to make changes. He has to make them tighter. He has to tweak his midfield. He has to fill gaps. He has to make them more compact and difficult to play through. And if he doesn't do that, I'm telling you now, get ready for a bad night, because Atalanta are a terrific side. They move the ball so quickly. They're very like Dortmund in terms of the speed that they can hit you at. And if Celtic are as open as they were in Dortmund, they'll get a spanking again. Yeah. It's almost guaranteed. So
we saw yesterday Dortmund lost 2-1 at Union Berlin.
Yeah.
So I mean, it can be done. You know, I do think it's a bit disingenuous to say, look, this is the only way we can play. It's the only way I'm going to play.
It's foolish. It's foolish, and it's beyond arrogant. And actually, the manager has an obligation to come up with a system that helps protect his players and protect his team.
Jeff Ray, live on YouTube, says it's how Celtic always play. It's in our DNA. No one's saying, Jeff, that you have to play that way every week against that, you know, Aberdeen, Hearts, whoever, Ross County. But when you're away at the Champions League finalists, I think you've got to make some concessions.
Yeah, and next up is the holders of the Europa League from last season. Yeah. These are top level teams.
Some of the best teams in the world.
And if Celtic go and play as wide open as they did the other night, they'll get another scalping. So I actually don't believe. I mean, I'm not saying for a second, and you know, nobody would expect Brendan Rodgers to park the bus in Bergamo and, you know, set out a side which is there with only one real aim, which is surviving. That isn't the Celtic way. That's absolutely correct. But there are ways of setting out a team to still retain ambition to go up the other end of the park and damage the opposition, but are also difficult and compact to get through. And that's the balance that he has to find, and he will. I refuse to believe that he's just going to go and say, "Same again, lads. Just play the same way as we did at St John's." I just don't believe it. And if it does happen, and he gets another scalping, then he's got nobody else but himself to blame. And I tell you now, I mean, I heard this thing about, you know, oh well, you know, we'll sit in and we'll probably still lose 3-0. If you make it competitive, and even if you do end up on the wrong end of a 2-1 or a 2-0 or whatever, but you've made it competitive, you've not embarrassed yourself, and even if it does feel like a hard luck story, Celtic fans, I think the vast majority of them would take a hard luck story over a humping.
Oh, aye,
because they don't want another one of them. It is embarrassing. It's excruciating to watch. So there is an obligation on Celtic to try and learn lessons and make sure the same mistakes don't happen over again. Of course there is. It's the whole point.